Power Platform and Copilot in D365 implementations, and next generation AI enhancing supply chain management in D365. Those are just two of the topics we're going to cover here in episode number 3 of the Journey to D365 podcast.
Welcome to Journey to D365, the podcast that covers everything related to Microsoft Dynamics 365 implementations. This podcast is not affiliated with Microsoft and covers the realistic truth behind D365 finance and operations and Business Central ERP implementation success. Whether you're new to the world of Microsoft or not, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, welcome to episode number 3 of the Journey to D365 podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their D365 implementations and also their non-Microsoft ERP implementations as well. This is the podcast that covers everything related to D365 implementations and all you need to know from a people, process, technology, and strategy perspective. And joining me as always is our co-host, Darian Fiakuski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excited for today's show, episode number 3. We've got 2 under our belt. We're becoming pros here slowly but surely in this podcast series. Excited for today's show. We've got a great guest named Mary Myers who's going to be on later today. She's a consultant in the D365 space. And not only does she know D365, but she knows Power Platform and Copilot. And she's going to talk with us about how Power Platform and Copilot are impacting and can impact and enhance D365 implementations. But before we get Mary on the show, we're also going to talk about, first of all, an audience question that we received in social media. And then we're also going to talk about next generation AI and how it's affecting supply chain management within D365 implementations. But before we get into the social media question and the newsworthy topic, just a couple of quick things. One is this podcast series is available at journey2d365.com. So just go to that website, bookmark it. You can check out past episodes you might have missed. You can go to that same website to see episodes as they're released. Again, journey2d365.com. And secondly, the show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including their D365 implementation. So thanks for being here today. So before we bring in our guest here in just a few minutes, Darian, tell us a little bit about the social media question you've got in store for us and this AI news from Microsoft D365.
Yeah, so this first, it's more of a comment from social media, I would say. I just want to get your opinion on it, Eric. It is, big businesses should interact with big businesses and small/mid-size should stay with small/mid-size. Because there is a cultural and language that your business speaks based on its size and its level of quote-unquote corporateness, and trying to mix and match those variables will leave your company lacking. As I always say, stay to vendors where you are their target customer. That is the best way to ensure good, reliable service. What is your take on this, Eric?
I partially agree with that. I mean, I think there is some truth to the fact that if you're a big company, you might need a big vendor, a big system integrator. If you're a smaller mid-size, it may actually backfire to work with a small or to work with a big partner. And if you're a big company working with a tiny provider, that could backfire as well, but not all the time. I mean, there's some merit to hiring a partner that's a bit smaller in that, you might be more important to that provider. It may be that you're aspiring to be a larger provider and therefore you want a larger, or maybe you're aspiring to become a larger organization. Therefore you might be more inclined to bring on a third party or a larger third party provider. So it really depends on where it is you're headed and what your goals and priorities are. But there's some merit to it. I think you have to look at those intangibles, though. I think that's the real takeaway here is look at those intangibles of not just what skill set does the provider have on paper, but is it a good fit? Is it a good cultural fit? Is it strategically a good fit with who you are today and what you're trying to become in the future?
Yeah, I'm glad we could get your take on that, Eric. That is really good to know. I want to switch now and get into our newsworthy topic right away today. This is all about how next generation AI, particularly Microsoft Dynamics 365 Copilot, enhances supply chain management by automating processes, mitigating risks, and optimizing operations. AI-driven capabilities enable predictive analytics, real-time decision-making, and intelligent process automation. Specific applications include AI-powered risk mitigation, optimized order fulfillment, and improved demand planning. The integration of AI in supply chains aims to improve efficiency, accuracy, and responsiveness, transforming traditional supply chains into adaptive and self-regulating systems. Eric, given the current advancements with the AI in supply chain, what future initiatives or developments in AI do you predict will have the most significant impact on supply chain management in the next 5 years?
I think the planning piece of it that you mentioned is probably where the if I had to pick one area, I think that's where the lowest hanging fruit is and the most potential value, because that's where I think so many organizations and teams have struggled for years is really planning and predicting the future based on history and based on what is likely to happen in the future. So now with AI, think about it, AI is a great tool to pull together multiple data sources and make sense of multiple data sources in a way that humans just haven't been able to. You think about how we did in the past is we'd create a really complex Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of what if analysis, and we might run some regression analysis or whatever it might be statistically, which is great. It's a start and it's gotten us to where we are today. But AI, I think, takes it to a whole nother level, because now you can be looking not just at historic data, but you can be looking at external third-party data, other trends in the market that might be affecting demand, which then affects your supply chain planning. So I think the ability to plan and predict customer demand, and then tying that back to the supply chain and how and when you need to procure raw materials, and how and when you need to have finished goods in which distribution center. I mean, that's a really complex process that organizations have struggled with for decades. So I think that's where I see a ton of value. And then another one that I just throw out there, just given where we are here in the 2020s, is you look at all the instability in the world ever since COVID. You have COVID, you have a couple of big wars happening throughout the world, some geopolitical stuff that's disrupting supply chains. And, what it's done is all these things, all these world events have exposed the vulnerabilities of the supply chain the way it was built starting back in the 80s, when 80s and 90s, when a lot of organizations were building these global supply chains. They were built on the assumption that things would be pretty stable, but things are not stable now, or as stable as they were. So you need to be more nimble. You need to adjust quickly. And AI is a great tool to help you do that and anticipate and identify where risks in your supply chain might be. So I think those are two big areas where I think if you could just crack the code on that and use AI in those areas, that could have a huge amount of value for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and I know this is something that Mary will definitely talk about further in a little bit here when she comes on, especially when it comes to Copilot and AI. But I want to ask you one more question before that, Eric. What metrics and KPIs would you recommend organizations track to effectively measure the success of ROI of AI-driven supply chain initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I don't have any general one size fits all metrics, but what I would say is whatever goals you're trying to accomplish as a supply chain manager or as an organization, you just want to translate those goals and objectives into metrics that are cascaded down to the project level. So, for example, if bloated inventory is one of your biggest challenges and one of the biggest things you're trying to address, then use that as your KPI. Our inventory turns, our average inventory level, those would be two metrics that you would use to ensure that you're achieving those benefits or the potential value of AI. Another one might be customer stockouts. If you're having trouble with customer stockouts because you're not planning well, you're not predicting the future well, then use that as your metric for how you measure whether or not AI is delivering the value you wanted, and set targets. You want to set targets for what you think AI should be able to deliver, and you use that to justify whether or not it's worth the investment that you're about to make in AI or whatever the product is that you're implementing. So I think so much of it comes back to whatever your strategic goals and objectives are. You start with the high level corporate objectives or the organizational objectives overall, and then you sort of cascade those metrics down to the more operational level, which can be influenced by the D365 implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. But I'm excited, like I said, to learn more about what Mary has to say about. I know she has a lot of knowledge about the Copilot and everything else within Dynamics. So I'm really excited to learn from her.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I think she'll be a great guest and excited to have her on. She's a first time guest on the show. She's going to be on talking about Power Platform and Copilot and D365 implementation. So we'll bring Mary on here in just a few moments. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to the Journey to D365 podcast. This is episode number 3. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. You can also listen to past episodes of the show by going to journey2d365.com as well. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is the company I'm the CEO of. And we are an independent tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their D365 and non-D365 implementations. So you can learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. So I'm excited for our guest here, Mary Myers, who's a consultant who is in the D365 space, has been in the D365 space for quite some time. Wanted to have her on the show, not only because she knows about D365, but more specifically, she knows a lot about Power Platform and Copilot and how it's being used in D365 implementations. So with that all being said, Mary, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to finally meet you and interview you here today, and excited to have an expert in the many things you're an expert in. But before we get into some of the many questions I have for you, just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, your background and your current company that you're working with now, or your company, WorldMax now.
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much. So a little bit about me. I'm now in the tech industry, but prior to being in the tech industry, I ran several different SMBs. Prior to getting into tech, and while I was doing that, I was going to school full time. I'm also a single mom, and so I had to get really good at being efficient at anything I did. And so that's honestly kind of how I led into the tech industry, where I've been for about the last 6 years. I was a Dynamics 365 F&O super user at one of the companies that I worked at prior to that. And so that's kind of how it led me into the Dynamics industry. I started off doing like Business Central and F&O implementations, but got started with the Power Platform, and then kind of tied in some of that previous experience of saying, how do I automate what users are doing on a day-to-day basis? And, so the Power Platform led its way to do that pretty easily. And I guess I got super obsessed with that and ended up starting my company full-time just a few years ago, back in February 1st of 2021.
Great. That's awesome. And what is it that WorldMax does? Like, what is your elevator pitch or value proposition?
Absolutely. So what we do is we help maximize Dynamics 365 with the Power Platform. And so what we do is essentially automation audits for small businesses. Well, either small businesses or large businesses, any businesses really, right? And say, what are your manual processes, and how can we use the Power Platform to make that better? So that's automating business processes, better reporting, integrating, different systems so that you're taking out that manual labor and really finding ways to, work smarter and not harder.
Right. That's great. And I've got a lot of questions for you that we're going to get to here in a minute about Power Platform and Copilot, some of these other Microsoft products and how they can integrate with or impact a D365 environment. So I'm looking forward to picking your brain on that stuff. But before I do, tell me a little bit about some of the nonprofit stuff you do too. You'd mentioned to me in the past that you are not only a consultant, but you do some nonprofit / volunteer type stuff too.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's honestly how World Max originally started. I hate to just like go on and on. Sometimes I feel like I could talk forever. But how I started with World Max is when I went to this app in a day class. I got really excited about what the Power Platform could do. I realized that I didn't have to spend all the time I did in school to kind of make transitions and make changes, and the Power Platform could do that for other people. And so I felt so fortunate to be in the tech industry because it absolutely changed my life. I was able to double my income. And again, as a single mom, that made an astronomical difference, right? And I was like, we have to share this with everyone because I'm not the only broke, struggling mom that's ever lived in this world, right? Or anyone for that matter, right? Like you don't have to just, be a single mom. But anyway, so I work a lot with nonprofits to help empower and upskill users in learning the Power Platform because you don't need a college education background, for it. And a lot of times it's kind of fun to share my little fun journey to how I got here because it helps. It's been really great to kind of work with different organizations to help other people see themselves in the tech industry, even though they don't come from a traditional tech background. A lot of times people think that maybe it's like this elite industry and you have to, come from like a CS school or something to that extent and be like a hard code developer, to make, really good money, honestly, in the tech industry. And that's just not true. So I work with a program called TechFluent. It's one of the organizations that I work with, and they have like a 12-week long training program where they work usually with underprivileged students. When I say students, I don't mean just like college students. It could be a college student, but it could be anyone of any age. Honestly, a lot of times people transitioning into this country. Maybe that need to kind of get on their feet as well, but really just a bunch of different areas. We train them in all of the different components of the Power Platform. So we work with them and we have like 2.5-day training courses, top to bottom. And so I work with them on that. And then I also work with them on teaching like different like soft skills. How do I be a consultant beyond just the technology? Because it's a lot more than just the tech. I learned that when I was, kind of getting started. So I'm just really passionate about kind of helping share that and helping people be in this industry because I love it. So I spend a lot of my time working with nonprofits, kind of in that way. There's another organization called the Power Platform School that's out of the UK. They do the same kind of concepts. There's either a 6 to 12-week training course. The students go through all the different components of the training course. And then at the end, they do, hackathons and they build projects so that they have like this workable, portfolio then to go to different D365 partners, right? Where now they have, it's a benefit for the partners. A lot of them are always like trained and certified in Dynamics as well. So yeah, I really passionate and spent a lot of time, with that. And then prior to that, I also opened up 2 different technology centers in Columbia, South Carolina. One of them was at a women's shelter. Again, technology changed my life. And I was like, I see myself in these women. Let me, work on that. So we opened up a tech center, got computers, service there for them. And then it was actually, again, right when COVID happened. And so there was children that were living there as well. And this was like a long-term women's shelter. So these kids ended up, all the schools shut down. So it actually worked out really well because this tech center also then served as like a school for the kids. So the kids were able to still go to school. And then the ladies, now it's funny. I was like, oh, well, we'll teach them all how to do the Power Platform. But you learn real quick that your vision and what's going to happen are not the same. And you just need to be there as a vessel to kind of help facilitate whatever needs it is that they have. So while nobody became a Power Platform, certified consultant. We have some real estate agents, some paralegals, people actually just able to keep up with their benefits. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
very cool.
what I do in my free time.
Yeah, and it sounds like that was a big part of how you started too, or at least with WorldMax, was doing that volunteer stuff, which is pretty cool. Um,
Absolutely.
well, very good. So I guess you started to allude to this a moment ago, but tell us a little bit about how you decided to specialize in D365. I know you said you're a super user. I understand you're an MVP as well, but how did you sort of stumble into it, or did you have some plan to become a D365 super user? How did it all start?
Yeah, so I was working in a manufacturing company at the time. We were using F&O at that company. And I had honestly worked in every department in that company, basically at that point in time. So I was very well cross trained. And anytime there was like an error in the situation, or that comes up on the computer, when you're working with F&O, it happens all the time. And people stop and they don't know what they're doing. I'm like, did we Google it? Like what? Like let's fix the answer, right? So then you become the coined super user. So I was, kind of doing that. But honestly, I was working myself to death. I was working like 6-7 days a week, sometimes 10, 12 hours a day, being cross trained, doing all the different things. And I was like, there's got to be a better life than this. And so I went back to school to get my MBA. And I actually started off getting my MBA in ERP management because I said, what's next out here, right? I looked at being a CPA and realized that in the state of South Carolina, they did not make enough money. So it was not worth those tests. And so I said, what has long-term future, right? And computerized accounting isn't going anywhere. So I started getting my master's in ERP management. And then honestly, I was sitting there at lunch one day. Well, I was talking to somebody and they said, well, you should talk to this person. They used to work at the company that I worked at, but they went on into ERP or, into the Dynamics world. So I set up a lunch with them for like an interview to be a consultant. I had no idea what that even meant, but I said, well, let's go for it. So we started this lunch off. And we started the lunch and I was like, look, I just wanted to let you know that if you want to hire me, you're going to need to let me know by the end of this lunch because I have another job lined up, but I have this interview. So I thought I would like do you the courtesy, right?
Right.
So by the end of the lunch, they hired me. And next thing I know, I was on my way to be on site in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I had no clue what I was doing. But what happened is I looked at that pay. I looked at what they were going to offer me to be a consultant, and I said, I will figure it out. So that's how I became a D365 consultant.
That's super interesting. Not your traditional grand vision from the start sort of a path, right? You sort of you pivoted as your career evolved, and that fateful lunch, the time-based close, is what got you into the industry.
Yeah, but I think that the important thing to note here, right, is that it is not like the traditional thing. I'm not unlike anyone else that just decides, hey, I'm going to be good at my job. I'm going to know the system. When there's a problem, I'm not going to wait for somebody to fix it for me. I'm going to, try to. And so you just get good at the system. That's all I did, right? Instead of sitting from this side, I went to sit on the back side of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm here with Mary Myers. We're talking about Power Platform and Copilot and D365 implementations. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to the Journey to D365 podcast, episode number 3. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. Thanks for being here today. I'm here with Mary Myers, and we're talking about Power Platform and Copilot in D365 implementations. So you're one of the few people that I know that know both D365 F&O and D365 Business Central. And we haven't talked a lot about it in this podcast yet around the big differences between Business Central and F&O, which are both D365, but they're different.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the main differences between the two products for those that might be still thinking about, I know I want D365, but I don't know which is better, BC or F&O?
Gosh, that's such a great question. And so like in the consulting world, I'll say it depends, right?
Right.
But no, high level, different things, right? So first thing that comes to mind is everyone traditionally will say, well, F&O is for enterprise, right? And SM in Business Central is going to be for your SMB. From a price point level, F&O, you've got to get out of bed price of about $250,000, okay, is what your average F&O project is going to be plus. You're looking at probably an 18th month plus long project, right? That's kind of like the scope. That's going to be like your traditional big, long ERP, what we think is like always out there. Where, Business Central, I worked for a company where we installed Business Central for $7,500. Okay. For Glapper, we would do that in 2 weeks, right? So you can have Business Central on something that low. And I know manufacturing companies or big ERP companies out there that are doing Business Central implementations for $250,000, right? So,
Right.
but that's kind of one of those things, right? That when we're looking at high level, how are they different? Normally, that's how people are going to categorize them. When I first started off, right, one of the things too is in F&O, you got about 15 ways that you can do something. And in Business Central, you might have 2 out of like base Business Central. So when I first started, and learned, so I self-taught Business Central to myself, right? I knew F&O. I've worked with various SMBs. When I was growing up, my mom ran her own company and she used QuickBooks. So I was in there entering POs and, sales orders when I was like 13 for her. So I'm like, we've got this handled. So I taught myself Business Central, and in that I realized, well, F&O, you can tell it what you're going to do, right, for your business processes, But Business Central, it tells you what you're going to do, right? So
Right.
traditionally, Business Central is going to have less functionality than something like F&O. However, this was a concept from 2018, 2019. Both of these products have really dramatically changed over, this time frame as well. Architectural wise, right? So again, like there's so many different things that are different about them from an architectural standpoint. F&O is a longer implementation process. You've got to call Microsoft 6 months ahead of time. And you're like, hey, on May 1st, if 6 months from now, whatever, I don't know what 6 months from now is. So October 1st, right? I would say October 10th to be exact. On October 10th, we're going to go live. I need you to check out my system, right? Like you can't go live without getting this approval from Microsoft to make sure that your architectural system is set up and is what it needs to be. And it's this big deal, right? For Business Central, I can turn on a Business Central license and get somebody up and running in a couple of hours, depending on the complexity, right? Like, so architecturally, they're very different, but they're merging more and more together, right? So then I got involved with the Power Platform, and I would say that Business Central, it can be more versatile. I say that when you take the Power Platform with Business Central can be just about anything that you want it to be, right? Because you can integrate, you can use what you need it to do, you can take the pieces that you need, you can leave the other parts that you want, right? And you can take in what you need at a price point that you need. Where with something like F&O, it's really big. Does that mean everyone should go and switch to Business Central? No, it doesn't, because there are situations where you're going to have volumes or you need more complexity than Business Central can handle, even with additional add-ons. Again, just because you can doesn't mean you should, is one of my favorite, scenarios. So
I love that line.
So those are so if you're looking, right, so kind of high level, if you're looking to bring it home, if you're looking at what should I go with, should I go with Business Central or F&O, I would say take a look at, honestly, what is your budget and what is your price point, right? That, and of course nobody wants to spend $250,000 to $500,000, right? But sometimes you realize that you have to. Like things, I've worked with a lot of biochemical companies and biomedical companies. Sometimes their precision and the complexities that they need, or government regulations, that's a thing to look at as well. Like, what are your hardcore requirements that make your company run? Is there anything unique with that? Those types of stipulations. What is your time frame? If you absolutely have to get going super quick, then maybe Business Central is going to be your option. But I would just honestly say, and maybe I've got my Business Central rose colored glasses on, but I would say don't let a partner just push you into F&O. If they aren't giving you another option, it's worth saying, let's talk about Business Central, because I just talked about those price points, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's a heck of a lot more money in F&O, and a lot of partners, not a lot, I will just say some of them out there, I've seen that they're like, let's just put them in that because that's what they've always known. A lot of times it's what they always know too. Maybe it's not even just a price point, but it could be that that's what they've always known, and they don't realize that you could do, hey, did you know that you could just do this simple add-on and Business Central and be a fraction of the price and have that same functionality? So just be asking. That's what I would say. You know what I mean? Just be asking about both options.
That's a great overview. And I would actually agree with you, and maybe even take it one step further and say that I would argue that that most are going to push you one way or the other. You have some that specialize in F&O. They're going to say, hey, you should go with the F&O. And by the way, it is worth noting that they are going to make more money if they sell you F&O than if they sell you BC for the reasons you just mentioned. But then on the flip side, there are Business Central specialists that will say, no, Business Central is good enough, and they might miss out on some of the complexities or the robust functionality you might need out of F&O.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even at that point, to your point, sometimes it's hard to find a big partner, or to find a partner that covers both really well. But they're out there. So definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
I think you're one, right? Eric, don't you guys cover both of them?
We do, yeah. We cover both systems and non D365 systems as well.
Right.
But what I found that's really interesting though about what you're alluding to here, and I think this is really worth digging into a little bit, is the whole Power Platform theme that you're bringing up here. Regardless of whether we're talking about F&O or Business Central, maybe just if we back up for a second, tell us what Power Platform is. How would you explain that to a layperson? And then I want to ask you some questions about how it could apply to a D365 implementation.
Perfect. So the most lamest terms, if I were to ask Copilot to explain Power Platform to me like a 5-year-old, I would say that the Power Platform is a set of tools that work with your business system or your ERP system to automate your processes and to take the manual things out and essentially make your jobs easier, right? They're taking those manual tasks and making it easier. So in the Power Platform, we have a couple different components, is what they'll call it. There's one, it's called Power BI. I call this the gateway. I call it the gateway to the Power Platform. Because here's the thing, in the ERP world, if you talk about reporting and you tell me I'm going to get better reporting, they're like, yeah, bring that to me, right? Like, let's change systems. No, not so much, but like better reporting, we'll take better reporting, right? But I'm going to be totally cynical of anything else. So we give them something nice like Power BI, and Power BI allows you to easily slice and dice your data. A lot of times with segregate reporting systems, it's hard to get data in there, and you're having to do a lot of imports, exports, right, to get your data in a lot of like Excel gymnastics. But Power BI allows you to basically just point and be like, here, I want this data, just a bunch of points and clicks. And then you can make pretty dashboards, essentially like if you're building a PowerPoint, if you can create a nice PowerPoint, you too can create a pretty Power BI, right? That's kind of the concept there. And then for me, I'm like, well, then that's when we get them hooked, because they're like, okay, I like this Power BI thing. Because then sometimes we're like, did you know that you can automate this report, or you could put this report elsewhere? And again, because it's the Microsoft ecosystem, we can take those Power BI dashboards, so dashboards that we're customizing, and then we can host them in Business Central, right? So somebody doesn't even have to go to a separate reporting system. They can see their data, right inside the ERP. So then they're like, okay, do you have more of this Power BI stuff? Like, what else can we do? Is there more to this Power Platform? And then I'm like, yes, there's this thing called Power Automate. And then that allows you to take those processes. Anytime that you're entering data, think data entry, like manual processes, Power Automate uses connectors, right? And then people are like, well, what are connectors? Connectors are different systems, right? So right now, the Power Platform allows you to easily plug and play, right? Basically put in username and credentials to over 1,000 different systems. They're connectors. So 1,000 different systems. So that means that, like, what I like to tell people, I'm like, that means that Business Central can connect or integrate, right? In the ERP world, that's the magic word. It can integrate with over 1,000 different systems. So I can integrate with something like Salesforce, right? For Business Central. And I've done this, like, gone toe to toe basically with a developer that didn't believe me. They were like 8 weeks behind on Business Central development for an SAP, for a Salesforce integration. I'm like, Power Platform, Power Automate. And they're like, no, we don't use janky products. And I'm like, it's not so janky. Needless to say, I had that integration done in like 4 hours. Right. And so that's the beauty of using something like Power Automate, because we're using these built-in connectors where basically they're saying, hey, we have all of the hard stuff done. You just map the fields, right? So that's what Power Automate does, making those manual processes easier. Then we have things like Power Apps, where again, we have these thousands of connectors. So basically data from over 1,000 different systems, I can easily create an app, right? And so I create apps for my ERP all the time, whether it be like an inventory update. I'm going to some conferences. So right now I've got like this little app on my phone that reads business cards and then automatically enters those business cards into my D365, sales. So I'm not having to worry about that. So it's just kind of using these easy applications Then we now have chatbots as well, right? So just like we're used to, I always use like the Delta app, right? But I mean, we're all used to these chatbots. We log on to a website or some type of phone application, the little thing jumps down there and we ask questions with it. So you can easily build those as well. And then we also have Power Pages, right? So think like e-commerce. So I think what I forgot to mention in all of these components is, of course, you can build these, but it's a low code, no code, right? You don't need to be a developer, because as we were talking about in my little story here, nowhere in there did I say I went to developer school, right? I taught myself how to do all of these things because it's as easy as being able to work with like a PowerPoint or Excel. So that's the rundown version of what the Power Platform is, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. That's a super helpful overview. I've never heard anyone describe it quite that concisely, and probably because you're not getting too far in the weeds of all the technicalities of the technology, which I think helps to understand it. But I'm fascinated by this. So you talked about the connectors with 1,000 different apps. You talked about Power BI. That all makes sense. But I'm curious, you were talking a little bit about task automation. Can you give us an example of like, what's an example of a task? Let's say you build a connector to Salesforce or some other system. Yeah. What's an example of an automation you might build using Power Platform?
Perfect. So let's think. So I'll use this Salesforce one, for example, right? I think it's fun to share about how we can interconnect with something other than right inside the Dynamics 365. So let's say I'm using Salesforce as my CRM system, right? That's traditionally what my company's always used. And then we just recently went to Business Central. But let's say maybe whenever I have a new lead, right, that's put into Salesforce, that's going to have probably a contact and account on there. And then maybe I want to keep that in Salesforce until the opportunity turns into an actual sale. I've closed that out. And so now I want to take that financial information, right? And I have that information, and now I got to enter that into Business Central. Probably what somebody's going to do is they're going to have Salesforce on this screen, and they're going to have Business Central on this screen, and they're going to be like, okay, so this customer's name and their account and this address, and they're going to enter all this information that they've probably entered one time. And then they're going to go and they're going to look and see what that sales order is, right? What did we win? What is the items? What is the special pricing, right? All these different fields, lots of opportunity for errors, distraction, right? And so what we do with something like task automation or like these integrations is I can say automatically, I identify the trigger point when a sales order or when a lead is won, when a lead status or an opportunity is changed to one, automatically triggers a flow where it's grabbing all of that information and it just puts it into Business Central. So whatever 15, 20 minutes, however long it was taking somebody to do is done. That job is done now, right? So those are the different types of things that we can do with Power Automate in the Power Platform, which obviously in the ERP world and the integration, those are somebody's whole jobs, right? They will spend all day, all week. So that's just one, right? And maybe maybe you're really fast. It only takes you 5 minutes, right? Well, let's say that, you want to close more leads in a day, right? So it's not bad at 5, but if you close 20 leads, we hope that we're closing leads, because if we're not closing leads, we got bigger problems than how long the data entry takes, right? Nobody's getting paid anyways. So it's kind of working smarter, not harder. Let's automate those processes so that then that salesperson then can go do something better, like go get more leads, not spend time doing data entry. So there's one example.
I'm here with Mary Myers. We're talking about Power Platform and Copilot and D365 implementations. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com, to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to the Journey to D365 podcast, episode number 3. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show by going to journey2d365.com. And the show is produced by Major Town Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. Thanks for being here today. I'm here with Mary Myers, and we're talking about Power Platform and Copilot in D365 implementations. Most organizations probably have dozens, maybe even hundreds of examples like that, like of a manual process where someone's taking data from here, entering it here. And if you could build through automation, I think that's a great way to streamline that process for sure. So you mentioned a few minutes ago, Copilot too. You alluded to Copilot. How are you seeing organizations, or are you seeing organizations leverage Copilot in a D365 environment to streamline processes in the same way you've just described Power Platform?
That's a great question. I think it's this concept that's still evangelizing. I see Copilot a lot like the Power Platform was a few years ago, right? Like you're going to have some organizations that are early adopters and you're going to have some that are going to be stragglers. I have one large client and we've trained over 200 users. They have, probably over 200 users so far they've trained in the last couple of weeks on just a generic how to use Copilot. And that would be like, how do I use AI in my day-to-day activities, right? So nothing earth-shattering, and this is just the free version of Copilot, right? So I would say that they're an organization that they're early adopters. They're trying to figure out all the different ways that they can, use Copilot and taking it seriously enough to provide their employees formal training, opposed to, hey, whoever wants to be like the smart tech person and go and use that and then tell everyone at lunch about it, right? So I have, I think it's great to see companies like that. And then I've also been on what I would say the conference circuit train for like the last 4 months, heavily going to different conferences and sharing how do we use Copilot within the Power Platform, because it's this concept of trying to evangelize people. That's kind of like a next level. First, we're trying to get them to use Copilot, right? We're trying to have that help people understand what is Copilot, which Copilot am I using, how do I use it on my day-to-day activities, and then saying, now, how do I incorporate that with the Power Platform to make it even better, right? Is kind of like a little bit like next level thinking. But I've been really excited and getting a lot of like aha moments from people. You see like the wheels turning when I'm saying, and now we can do it at this scale. Did you know how to do it at this scale? And, honestly, when we're looking at Dynamics products, right? So kind of circling back with Dynamics and Power Platform and Copilot, all in that, you have Microsoft that's doubling down and they're putting Copilot inside of Dynamics. Right. And so it's allowing customers to say, okay, how can I use this? All the different components. So it's really changing. It's going to be really changing the way that people are working. But right now, a little bit of it is kind of that, what are we doing? And you're gonna, you have people all
Yeah.
over. It's kind of like that scurry phase. It's really how I feel, right? You have some early adopters and people that want to be seen as like the thought leaders, and they're either they have the information to be doing that, or they're just making it up and nobody else knows enough, so they're going along with it, right? Like we see a lot of that right now. And you have other people that are like, Copilot is going to take over the world. I'm done hearing it, and somewhere in between. So
Right.
yeah, that's the Copilot world I see right now.
Yeah, it seems like there needs to be somewhat of a balance between sort of a grassroots, bottoms up use case formulation or innovation, but also at some point you mentioned the word at scale. You've got to bring it from the top down and say, okay, this was a good idea, or these are some ways that we can automate some of our processes. Now let's roll that out to the entire organization. So I think finding that balance of sort of the grassroots versus the top down, I think would be important here.
Yeah, so one of my favorite examples, right, that like I'm sharing and that people get really excited about is I also have this thing like Copilot's like Excel, right? And so in that concept, if you put bad data into Copilot, if you put bad prompts, right, like you're gonna get bad answers out of Copilot,
Right.
right? And so all of this kind of dives into our system and how we use it as well. So one of these, there's two components from like, let's take Dynamics and Power Platform and Copilot and marry them all together to your point to say, how do we find the really like sweet spot of this? And so, one thing that, a great prompt is saying, how can we use Copilot to qualify leads for us, right? Again, I'm always about like leads. How can we make this process better, more efficient? Leads turn to money, and that's kind of how the whole circle goes. So, you can ask Copilot, hey, act like a salesperson and look at what this person is looking for in a lead. Why don't you compare it to the services that I provide, that my organization provides? Go ahead, identify if this is like rate, qualify this lead for me is good, bad, or hot, right? And then enter that information into my CRM system for me automatically with these notes, right? So you could ask that one time, or you could do that at scale. But when we can combine both of these things, right? So now I'm having you do the thinking for me. I'm having you doing the entering in my system for me. I'm having you do the automation, because I actually also have like my flows set up so that if we've qualified that as a hot lead, it sends me a Teams notification right away as well, because the worst thing that you can do is let a hot lead sit, right? We've got to turn those around. So it gives me a Teams notification that says somebody in my team, right, can be like, oh, sweet, we just got this hot lead in. Where did it come from? Go to your CRM, right? Like it doesn't, and so now you can just really focus all your efforts, right? So I see that as being like one of those things. And then, also it's really about automating, right? That data, I think to me, more than ever, it's super important to automate our data into our CRMs. Like, because again, if we have bad data, if Copilot, right, if we're asking Copilot to look at our CRM data so that it can give us intelligent information, but we have a bunch of holes in our CRM system, then what good is that, right? Like that's not going to serve anything.
Right.
So use automation. And that's why I said I have like this app where I'm scanning all of my business cards, right? So that they're automatically going into my CRM system, because I'm getting that part done for me. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to say, hey, Copilot, tell me what to do, right? Tell me how to act on this. But you have to automate that system, right? You have to automate to make sure that your data, whether it be your CRM or your ERP system, because, F&O and Business Central now have Copilot capabilities as well, right? But we can't ask it to do information if we, don't have our ERP. If any of our data is not right, Copilot is not going to give us good information.
Right.
So to me, that's the sweet spot. I get really excited about it. So,
It's super cool though, because it opens up so many avenues of opportunity, beyond what you would get straight out of D365. So it just gives you other opportunities to take it even further and streamline and make your process better, your business better.
Absolutely. That's why I say, like, I feel like when I take the Power Platform and add it to something like Business Central or F&O, right? Like, honestly, like the opportunities are endless, right? Like we can do just about anything because I have access to over 1,000 different connectors, right? But like, let's say that that's not enough, and I have a connector, or I have a product that it's not on, that list of connectors. Then the next question would be, does it have an API? Because as long as you have a cloud API, whether it's on that connector or not, if you have an API, I can connect to it via the Power Platform. It's like I have a straight, easy, way to connect to it. So it allows me to mix different products and APIs, and no other like ETL product out there, right? Like no other integrator services allowing you to easily do that. Or you have a product like Solago. I think that's the way that you pronounce that. But when you're using, again, the Microsoft ecosystem and Dynamics and the Power Platform, you get premium connectors. It's no additional license to be able to use that. So those 4 connectors is just the consulting time.
Yeah. So if you use these different connectors, you use the Power Apps to create some task automation, and obviously Power BI on the analytics or the reporting side, business intelligence side. You use all these different tools in a D365 environment. In D365, both Business Central, F&O, and especially Business Central are constantly changing and evolving, and there's new updates and new enhancements to the products in a cloud environment. Is that mess up any of the capabilities that you might, in other words, are you limiting yourself in the future by making these quote unquote changes to the software, even though you're not really changing the software? It's low code, no code. It's more of a integration in many cases, but is it creating complications later on when you try to take advantage of some new capabilities that come out in the future?
No, that's one of my favorite things kind of about using the Power Platform to extend, whether it be F&O or Business Central. And this is for 2 reasons. One, with Business Central, when you're using their standard APIs, like as those change, your products are just going to like update and change. Maybe you're going to have some new fields available. Maybe you're going to eventually have to update your flow, but it's not going to break your Business Central system. And I think that that's really what's great about using something like the Power Platform is you are enhancing your system and you're getting that seamless integration feel and experience without actually 9 times out of 10 heavily touching your actual base Business Central. So maybe I have a specific, purchase order approval for a specific product that we're sourcing from a specific vendor. And, we've been doing that for the last 2 years, and, we've seen an uptick in it. So we're going to keep doing that, right? So we're going to have this special approval workflow for them. But then I don't know, maybe some catastrophic situation happens and now we can no longer source that. So we've now cut off, we're not going to be able to use that anymore. So we don't even need that workflow. We've not customized anything. You know what you do? You go into Power Automate and you hit the on off button, right? And so that's what I love about using something like the Power Platform to extend and customize. It's really what you're doing. You're customizing your user experience, but you're not hurting that base application. Right. And you're leaving it so that it's like evergreen. So you're not worrying about like those situations that happen where maybe you have somebody that like, I don't know, built the super custom thing and then they go hide in a closet for the rest of their lives. And so you're, attached to them. You can't do anything else. It's Power Automate. It's very versatile. So I don't know. You're not stuck in those situations, I think is the question that you're asking. It allows you to turn off that service as your business changes, right? As it ebbs and flows and grows and changes. When you're using something like the Power Platform, you just cut off that extension, right? Like you just sever the part you don't need anymore, basically.
Yeah. And that's something that's pretty unique, for those that are interested in terms of how D365 compares to other ERP systems in the market. There's just a lot more flexibility with some of these tools and a lot of, I don't want to call it customization because it's you're not really talking about customization, but it's sort of extensions of the product without limiting yourself in the future. And I think that's really unique to D365 when you compare it to like S/4HANA on SAP or Oracle NetSuite or some of these other systems that just don't have that same level of flexibility.
Exactly. I can literally put an easy button inside of Business Central. You know what I mean? That basically says, turn this button on, and I can, whenever I press that button, I can do whatever I want. So, yeah. Right.
That's really cool. So based on all this experience you have, just as a way to sort of summarize it to the best of our ability, how would you, what advice would you give to an organization that's about to start a D365 implementation, which is a majority of the audience that's listening right now are people that are either in the middle of one or about to start a D365 implementation. When you think about all these different tools that you're familiar with and this experience you have, what are the top 2 or 3 takeaways you'd leave with the audience here today?
Start simple and small, right? MVP approach. Because there's all these exciting things out there, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be a phase 2, right? So don't get distracted by all the bells and whistles. No, but you need to know what that plan is out there, right? You need to know what's possible, but know when to apply it, right? And then to start simple. So I think that would be like one of the biggest takeaways that I would say there. And honestly, that even applies to which product that you're choosing. Start simple.
Right.
Can you be, right? Like, I don't think that there's a person out there that says, hey, if both of these products do the exact same thing of what the functionality that I need, I can get out of Business Central and I can spend a fraction of the price. But no, I really want to spend, this extra bit. I don't think ERPs are like name brand commodities yet where we're bragging because, we've got the Louis Vuitton of the ERP, right? So start small.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. I bet Microsoft wishes that we could be like that. But yeah, so just kind of keep it simple, MVP approach, know what the possibility of that is out there, have different phases. So as you're kind of starting small, just kind of have different phases in play and be true to the phase that you're in. Don't let yourself scope out. Because that's where your projects, when you want to talk about your project going over budget and over time, that's when you're getting too complicated, right? And so I guess that's what I'd really say.
Yeah.
If you want to stay on scope, you know what I mean, in budget and on time, keep it simple and small and bite off as you go. And then also with that I would say is as you're kind of starting off, sometimes with Business Central, especially, I would say with Business Central, if you're like, okay, yes, we know that we're going to Business Central. There's a lot of apps. That's how you're going to, there's 3 different ways to extend Business Central. So be aware of that. That's going to be customized solutions. That's straight up development. You're going to have pre-built ISV solutions, and you're going to have Power Platform solutions, or I'll say that the Power Platform can also come into play there. So kind of as you're scoping, right? So keep everything small, but as you're scoping, if you have gaps that are critical, go live gaps, know what your options are. And again, keep it simple. Don't go for a custom development because the partner's like, oh, we can develop that for you. We created something like that for you one time, or a customer one time. Again, that's going to make them money. You're always going to be relying on them if there's other ways to go. Yeah, maybe there's an ISV, right? Maybe that's going to be your best app or opportunity.
Yeah.
But maybe that ISV is more expensive and more that you need. And then, there's opportunities then where the Power Platform can be this perfect little piece, right? That's exactly what you need. So know your options and keep it simple, I guess, would be the highest level takeaways that I can give, if that makes sense or is helpful, hopefully.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that's a great takeaway and a good thing to remember. Now that we're talking about, or now that many people listening are either entering or already in the D365 ecosystem, you just have to recognize that one of the advantages of this ecosystem is there's a lot of options, as you just talked about for the last several minutes, but also along with those options means you've got to do your due diligence and figure out what the best option is. It's because it's a lot easier now to go down some rabbit holes or some off ramps that don't make sense for you, or they're not the best option for you. There could be other things out there. So you just want to keep your options open. So that's great advice. Well, I want to thank you for being here today, Mary. Great chatting with you. And this is super helpful. And I learned a lot. Hopefully the audience did too. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
For sure. And how do, just as a closing last minute or a last closing thing, how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me basically across all social medias. You can find me on TikTok at the Power Platform Partner. You can find me on LinkedIn at Mary Myers. And then you can always send me a good old email at mary@worldmaxp2.com. And we'll just leave it at those 3. Will be the easiest way for you to connect with me.
All right. Thank you again, Mary. Great to have you on the show. Really appreciate your insights and some of the unique perspective you bring, as well as the energy you bring to the conversation. So thanks for being here today. We've got a couple things we're going to follow up on and dive into in a little bit more detail just as a follow-up to that conversation. So be sure to stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the Journey to D365 podcast.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we publish. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to the Journey to D365 podcast, episode number 3. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Fiakuski. And Darian, we just had Mary Myers on the show. We're talking about Copilot and Power Platform in D365 implementations. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just really enjoyed hearing her different experiences from transitioning into the tech industry to becoming a super user of Dynamics 365. I think that transition is super cool. She also discussed a lot about her company and how maximizing the Dynamics 365 with the Power Platform to automate business processes for various businesses and how she's done that in the past and is still doing that. I think that was all super informative and really good to learn from experiences that she has had. I have a couple questions to follow up with you, Eric, about this conversation. First one being, how do businesses typically decide between FO and Business Central, and what factors should they prioritize in this decision?
Yeah, it's a great question. We sort of danced around that or touched on that a little bit with Mary, but it's worth diving into here. And that is, Business Central is generally the smaller companion or the smaller version, if you will, of F&O. So F&O is generally built for larger enterprises. It's more complex, it's more robust, more sophisticated. There's more capabilities there. There's generally more flexibility. Whereas Business Central, I would say, is more of a competitor with like a NetSuite, a SaaS cloud solution that's meant for an organization that is going to have an easier time just adapting to the software and the relatively structured way that the software works. F&O is got a ton of different ways you can configure and set up the software, which leaves you with more options. But if you're not a big, complex organization, the product might be too big and complex for you. So that's one of the, probably the simplest ways to differentiate between the two. Then, of course, they actually are two totally different products too. I mean, it's even though they're both Microsoft, they were through acquisition. Business Central is through the acquisition of Navision, and so that's a different product than what F&O is built on. So different platforms, different functionality, different capabilities, but in general, BC is meant for smaller to mid-sized organizations, while F&O is for larger enterprises.
And now in your case, Eric, I want to know, what are some of the most innovative uses you've seen from Power Platform for automating business processes in the recent, I guess, few months or years?
I think most of the high value areas I've seen it have been in the really, manual processes. So when there's manual entry of data and re-entry of data between systems and that sort of thing, that's all stuff that's ripe for automation using Power Platform. So there's a lot of what I love about the idea and the concept and the approach of Power Platform is you can use it to sort of pick off little use cases of how you can improve your business. You don't have to wait to do a big, massive rollout of the software. You can be using it, selectively and very deliberately and to improve some of your processes. So anything that's highly manual and inefficient within your organization, those are generally the areas where you see the biggest bang for your buck in that technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that was a really informative podcast. I think Mary had a lot of great experience that she could share for this podcast. And we're only 3 episodes in. I feel like I've learned so much about D365 so far, and I'm excited to keep going with the rest of the season.
Likewise. Yeah, we got a lot of great guests coming up here in the several episodes we're going to be doing here. Next week, for example, we'll have Jeff Nelson from the Third Stage Consulting team on. He's going to talk with us about some of the lessons from D365 implementations, and in particular, the successful ones. What did the successful ones do that were better than the ones that didn't succeed? And we'll unpack that with him. And based on his experience, not only implementing it as a customer, but he's also now a consultant with Third Stage. So he's working with multiple project teams right now, helping implement D365. So he'll have some unique perspectives. We'll have him on the show next week, and we'll have a lot of different guests throughout the remainder of the season as well. Like you said, we're only 3 episodes in, and we've got a lot more to cover this season. So look forward to it. So want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Darian, for joining us again, as always. And if you'd like to see other episodes and keep up with future episodes, be sure to bookmark journey2d365.com and go to that website to keep up with new episodes as they drop every week throughout the season here. And you can also view the past episodes at that same website, journey2d365.com. So hope you have a great week. We'll look forward to seeing you next time in the Journey to D365 podcast. Take care and have a great week in the meantime.